Now, something that's out right now, something we can discuss having seen it, is Runaways Season 2. Now, Runaways Season 1 was one of my favorite comic book shows, hard stop. I was impressed by the tone. I was impressed by the world building. I was most impressed that it steered away from Brian K. Vaughan in a lot of ways that didn't piss me off. I think that like this sacred text, and they still made it work. Season 2 does that in new and exciting ways. Season 2 builds. Season 2 answers a lot of questions while also being more the pace I think a lot of people wanted from Season 1. They listened to all the naysayers and people that liked the show and built, I think, a perfect second season. Second season, I think, is even better. What do you got?
This was one of my, so I watched it in 2018, but we're considering it in 2019 show. This was one of my favorite shows, comic book shows, especially of a season thus far, especially from, like you said, they laid the groundwork in Season 1. I know there were a couple complaints like, oh, it's a little bit too slow for me, this and that, but what they did was just lay the groundwork, especially with what they did with the parents, making them more empathetic, making you really feel for them and see where they're coming from. So that really paid off in Season 2 because it literally, from the first 5 minutes on, it's nonstop action. It's like it just keeps going. And one thing I really appreciated about it is a lot of times in these Marvel properties and just shows in general, when they come to 13 or 14 episodes, you get a couple episodes just scattered in there just to be filler episodes so they don't burn through the plot so quickly or get to the main storyline. But this season, literally, it was like there were no filler episodes. Like each episode,
been longer.
That's what I'm saying. This could have been. I wanted this season to be long. Could have been a 22 episode season. It would have worked out just fine. But this season is just each episode just picks up one after the other, and they're all crucial to each other. It's like you can't not watch one episode and not. I mean, you can't watch one episode and miss
not keep powering through.
Not keep powering through. Like you have to watch every episode, and you just fall in love with these characters. It's ridiculous.
And I agree exactly with what you're saying, because Season 1 established that the parents weren't just the black and white evil parents of the book, and that wasn't on Brian K. Vaughan. He thought the book was getting canceled constantly, so they wrote the characters as these are the kids, the parents have to be this. And I love that gave us two different Runaways. The show and the book are very different in good ways, but because of Season 1 making us love the parents so much, it allowed Season 2 that when things start happening that are pure evil, you go, I like them. Why do I feel so? You get that Walter White thing where you're torn because Heisenberg is suddenly Heisenberg and you love Walter White. So these characters, as they turn villainous, you really start to be affected by them in a very different way than the book because you're with them. Now, I also love that Season 2 was able to move so many moving parts. There's almost 4 acts. You almost have 4 different structures of villain versus hero. You have different action structure, and they also laid a bunch of Easter eggs I didn't think that would land if you're not a comic fan. Now, did you know the Brian K. Vaughan work before?
Just a tad bit, so not like super hard, but I like read up. I read up on it and did all that. But one thing I did notice was like you said, the MCU tie-ins. Yeah, it's not really a spoiler, but like they do it. They've already mentioned online.
There's a shirt you're wearing that.
Yeah, there's a Wakanda reference that I thought it was just laid in there so subtly, so casually, and it's just like that stuff like that was weaved throughout the season. It's just that's what we needed, and because it just makes it, like I said again earlier, it makes it feel connected to this bigger world, and they don't have to like go all out about it. They just casual references like that throughout it. I really appreciate it. And one thing that they touched on that you don't really see on a lot of comic book shows or shows in general is Gert's mental health. Like they really, I really respected how they approached that storyline and just showed that it wasn't just a one-off. They carried it throughout her. It was essential to her story arc. So just them carrying that storyline throughout it and showing the effects of her not having her medication and stuff like that, it was handled really respectfully. And you don't often see that a lot of times in comic book shows. So I thought that was cool.
I also really like that it's a show that's very intentionally each table in high school. You got the goth table, you got the jock table. That's very much this team. They're all very strongly, not a cliche, but close to a cliche of that ilk. And they also show that kids don't always get along that are of different styles. And I really like that they made the jock loving the nerd work so well that it felt so authentic, and that there were also frustrations in that. They didn't shy away from the differences between people because people are inherently different. Like there's no way we're all going to get along because we're all not alike. So I really like that even amongst the Runaways and amongst the parents, there was little that felt authentic. It didn't feel like they were building for drama.
I talked about this earlier, or I say this, like they did a good job of showing diversity and inclusion without even have to bring it up. It just felt organic. Like that's how it's supposed to be representative of the world we live in 2008 or 2019. Now it's just all organic. Like we have a little Latina girl like being badass, being best friends with your boy. what's his name? I mean,
Gregg.
Yeah. With Gregg. So it's just like just the dynamic between all of these characters. It really feels authentic and genuine. Like this cast is so good across the board, and the fact that they hang out with each other outside of the show makes it even feel more like a family. And that's one thing that's really separates Runaways from other shows is the age range. You have like from Molly being a little kid to all the way to the oldest cast members are being adults. Like you never really see that on other Marvel properties. You get like most of the heroes or the main protagonists, antagonists are around mid 30s, but they'll have minor characters around them that might divert in age, younger or older. But this cast is just like diverse across the board, which makes it even more special in my opinion.
Well, and I also think that having a, like you said, 14 to, you know, the parents, there's that giant swath of cast, but it's also an 18-member cast, which is really incredible that there's 18 complete leads of the show that we get enough time with that we don't feel like anyone gets short-shifted.
Right.
Like, we were all so impressed when Infinity War landed and all of our characters got enough time to shine, but TV shows in their narrative function allow us to have that in long form. There's not a single character, and I love this cast, I love the entire world that they build, that I felt didn't get enough attention in season 2, and the show Bible must have been insane. I can't imagine juggling all of those things and making it work, and I felt more for the parents in this season than I even did in season 1, and in season 1 I felt more for them than the book. So it's actually one of those rare things that as a comic fan I feel transcends the medium of comics. Only in TV can this story that they told work, and I like how different it was than the comic.
Exactly, and that's one I kind of touched on it earlier. I keep saying that, but with like with shows like that, you never really see a show go from such a drastic change in tone from one season to another without it feeling like a completely different show. The last time I can remember that was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but with this show, it from season 1, like the end of season 1 going into season 2, feels different, but in a familiar way, if that makes sense. It's just like it just picks up and it doesn't look back. It's like, all right, we set up the groundwork, we have our characters, they're detailed, they're plotted out, and now we're just gonna just go and just run with it from there.
Now we've stayed very spoiler free on purpose, but the way I felt about it was season 1 felt like an act 1 where you have to establish how much you love these characters, so that in season 2, as the action picks up, you love them enough that when they do horrible things, you're like, I empathize. Now what I love about this season was it had that Act 2 and Act 3 with season 3. The way season 2 left off, you're like, I want this comeuppance, I want this conclusion. You have all of this buildup, and it didn't feel like I was shorted. I didn't feel like they were teasing me.
Exactly.
I could not begin to imagine writing this show. I can't begin to act this show. I can't begin to imagine the minds that put this show together.